Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, Rayde, founder at The Connect, is back for a fun review of the industry with focus on technology and how it's being used for fan engagement. We talk about improving the stadium experience. Remember, this is the door opener that trickles the revenue from the other pillars of the sports business model, commercial and broadcasting. We talk about NFTs, about streaming, about content. As is usual the case with Rayde, this was a blast, so make sure you stick around. Before we go into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. Remember, this 2024 is going to be a busy one. If you visit our website, you're going to find all the information about our upcoming events in London, in Sevilla, in Mexico. Hopefully, we'll meet you there. And now, let's dig into the world of technology in football with Rayde Luis Baez. Once again, welcome to the World Football Summit podcast. I had to invite you back because, there's so much going on in terms of, streaming, content, so many things going around in the industry. And I thought, who could I invite to have a great conversation and fun one like always? So that's right. So once again, welcome.
Thank you, Jaime. It's always a delight to be here and an honor to be in a conversation with you. That's for sure. It's always fun.
It's always fun. That's what I was going to say. Anyway, Rayde, so before we go into everything we want to talk about, what's up? Why, what have you been up to? What's new with you?
Well, actually, it's been interesting the last few months, or probably over a year. A lot of consulting projects, more focused on business transformation. So trying to help some companies to widen their reach and modify their revenue model. Also some brands that are devising certain new steps, let's say in their marketing, especially internationally and especially focusing in the US. So helping them in creating that strategy and accessing certain partnerships there. And also, which is kind of the norm for all the executives like me that are engaged by a couple of private equity funds and groups that are looking at investing in European sports. So, quite busy, but in a fun way. So projects that also, allow to learn and understand different perspectives of the business, which is always rewarding.
Busy is good. Anyway, the last time we were speaking about the role of content and how important it was to attract new audiences to engage. But lately, we've seen so many things around sponsorship, around broadcasting, but I think I want to start with sponsorship. Anything that we should focus on regarding to the landscape there? How's that evolving?
Absolutely. I definitely think that as everything in the industry, everything is shifting and evolving. And I would say that rather quickly and faster in the last couple of years, especially in the post-pandemic phase. I definitely think and see, because of the conversations that I'm having with different brands across the globe, Asia or Europe or even in the US or the rest of the Americas, is that they do understand the power of sponsorship or partnerships, but they also now are more focused on not only awareness or positioning, but actually in conversion and actually being able to impact their bottom line. So performance-based partnerships or performance-based sponsorship, I think, is going to be the norm in the industry, especially for big blue chip brands. That those are the brands that everyone in the industry wants to be partnered with. So you want the strong brands. They are the brands that people want to buy and they want to engage with, and you want to be a part of that communication and marketing strategy. But for you to be able to offer them something, it needs to be related to the performance of your platform towards their business, right? I definitely think that that's going to be the next threshold that sponsorship or partnerships will evolve towards.
I agree. I think the focus now for marketers, that are working for brands involved in football, is to actually go down the funnel. So it's not about, creating impact and awareness anymore. It's actually just how everything drives revenue. No, so I do agree that's going to come, and we're kind of seeing important dynamics there also with the most recent examples related to kits. So the FC Barcelona example comes to mind. A few weeks ago there was a lot of buzz around them actually dropping their contract with Nike and doing their own brand, if you will. Then you see the German national team just changing. I mean, that was just so groundbreaking. Seeing him actually leave Adidas and go over to Nike. So I don't know. Do you think all of these changes that we're seeing, or all of these hints at changes, are they going to be sustainable? Are we going to actually going to see them?
I definitely think that change is inevitable. The thing is, what shape that change takes. It's going to be the interesting part to discover, right? In the case of Barca, and not to focus specifically on their case, but I think it's somewhat a general, situation with clubs, is that there's so much variability and there's so much around those clubs that doesn't necessarily impact positively the business of the partner, that makes a different conversation when you are talking about growing fees or renew upward renewals and things like that, right? In the case of Barca, which is very particular and close to us, I think is because of a different set of constraints or challenges. Evidently, the cash flow constraints that the club has limited even the capacity or capabilities that they have to compete. And that's something that the managers need to solve. I don't necessarily agree how they went about this conversation with Nike and Nike actually making it that public. And I don't think, that plays well. And in the mid or long term, I think they will pay for that. But the reality is that it goes to business and model and a bottom line reflection. A few years ago, I don't know if that changed, but a few years ago, when you analyze the financial reports and accounts, annual accounts of different brands, in the case of Nike, the accounting category in which they, kind of encapsulated everything that is related to marketing, sponsorship, and pricing, things like that, which can be defined as demand creation. So that the investment that they do to create a demand to sell their product was around 10 to 11% of the total revenue they generate. So if you extrapolate that to specific deals, the deals that they have individually with athletes or with the clubs, someone need to reflect that so the financials make sense. So if you take that same rule, that means that the 100 million euros that Barca is receiving from Nike, granted that it's not just sponsorship, is commercial royalties and different things, but in general need to translate into 1 billion in sales for Nike. You could argue that that's probably out of reach and that there's a discount into that expectation of revenue based on the relevance of the brand, the strategic positioning against their arch nemesis, which is Real Madrid, which is an Adidas club, etc., etc. So there are many considerations that you take into account when analyzing not only the financials, but the economic structure of the deals. But the reality is that it's very difficult for any standalone property to generate those big amount of revenue, right? When you compare that to national teams, which in turn is something that is more stable, that is something that is more widely adopted by a country that, roots and supports their national team, kind of makes more sense for those big investments for kids than the club says, because in the club, you can have a very bad season, you can have controversy, you can have your relegation. And that's something that, even though you try to think when you are negotiating the contracts and putting all the covenants and the caveats to actually be able to reflect whatever future situation, it is a very hard impact into the business. But national teams give you something different. And in the case of Nike, snatching the German national team, I think is more than business even. It's like a trophy to actually be able to do that. But in turn, what Adidas did was snatch Liverpool from Nike, which if people can remember, not too long ago, Liverpool went from New Balance to Nike on the premise that they will receive less minimum guarantee, but that the marketing and the platform on Nike and collaborations with LeBron James and different Nike athletes and so on will make sales even greater and the royalties will be bigger. That went out of the window. They went to a more stable contract with Adidas and so on. So I definitely think that there's a mini battle of the brands, which is probably almost a decade since the last time we saw that. France stayed with Nike. Brazil, it's negotiating, and they are, for what I know, discussing with different brands right now. So maybe that's a surprise that we get there, or maybe not, because I don't think that Brazilians and actually global football fans don't see Brazil with another brand that is not Nike, precisely because of the great advertising and marketing that they did in the 90s and early 2000s, right? So, that I think that that's very interesting. And that category per se, which is very much linked to performance in terms of sales and product and distribution and all that entails, which is very complex, is very susceptible to fluctuations or perceptions in terms of the business and the investments that they need to make to actually retain those IP.
This is a chess match, no? So everybody looks at these deals like individual moves when actually they're part of an overall strategy. Question is, what strategy is each brand following? And with it,
and it's sorry to interrupt you, and it's a zero sum
no worries.
Game. So whenever Nike moves and invests in X,
yeah,
it's not that they will continue to invest the same in the others, and that has been proven, decade after decade. It is a zero-sum game. The resources and the amount of money from big brands is limited in terms of sponsorship or partnerships. And actually, that's also what transpires. When you are property X and you see property Y, closing a certain deal, you know that your panel is shifting in terms of what you actually can get in the market.
And to that equation, I think we're not factoring in the players. And what I mean by that is, we're speaking about properties, national teams, and all of that, but we live in a world where the players are actually becoming huge personal brand themselves. So I guess it's also part of the chess move, right? But we're going to have to wait and see what, how that evolves and how these brands adapt world. But anyway, Rayde, another thing that has recently kind of like shifted or shaken the pillars of the industry has been the broadcasting deal that Netflix has announced with the NFL, where they will, be showing Christmas games, which has been, that's been an interesting evolution, The Christmas game in the United States has always belonged to the NBA. Then suddenly last year, the NFL enters the scene, and then Netflix now bids for that when they pretty much never gone into the live right till very recently. How is that going to change or impact the global sports industry? Is this, again, another isolated move, or are we going to see more of this?
I think that there are two layers, I would say, spheres of influence for that decision. On the one side, evidently, in terms of the local market, it is a major shift. And actually, it is part of a wider conversation and transformation that is going on within the NFL and with the NFL Players Association in terms of expanding the calendar of the NFL. I guess people will know, but for the ones that don't, the NFL is the property in the planet that has the biggest revenue in terms of TV, sponsorship, and everything in general as a whole. So league and clubs and teams, franchises, as they call it there. But it's also the competition, the top competition in the world that has the least amount of games. The regular season is 17 games, then you have playoffs, which is a couple of rounds, and then you have the Super Bowl. That's pretty much it. So, if you play the Super Bowl, you play 20 games. The discussion right now is how to create, at least, imagine the impact that is. The discussion is how to go from 17 to 18, adding one game per team. And that's a major discussion. Evidently, it goes to the fact that it's a very brutal sport in terms of the physical condition of the players and what they submit themselves to play it. So an extra game means, an extra potential of injury, so on. And mind you that the average professional career of an NFL football player is around 3 years and a half, 3 seasons and a half, which is very, very concerning in terms of the longevity and the health of that person actually after he retires from playing. So there's a big conversation there in terms of how to make the revenue exponentially bigger by adding one calendar game more. And what you are doing now is kind of reshifting the calendar. There's a lot of international games, as you could see, in the calendar is probably the league in the world that plays the most amount of games abroad, which is somewhat counterintuitive because if you have few games at home, why would you relinquish that and go play in London, Germany, or in Brazil, or in Madrid in 25, right? So it's an interesting case of that conversation. So, but that's the local impact of the decision. So it's trying to extract maximum value for what you have. So reshifting calendar dates. So you didn't play in Christmas, now you play. And why is important then in the global scheme of things? And in the case of Netflix, which is a company that last year said that they wouldn't go into live sports. The thing is that once you open that window of the Christmas games, which is right in the middle or leading towards the buying season, holiday season, right? It's a very festive period, and a lot of advertising goes around in Christmas. What Netflix is planning to do, or at least that's what the reports say, is they will broadcast those games to the whole world because it's a different package. So it is free globally to the whole world and on a free advertising based tier. So you don't need to be a premium subscriber. Maybe you just need to register interest, get into the Netflix database, and you will watch the games, right? But it's going to be ad supported. So potentially what they are building there is their own Super Bowl in terms of advertising, because it's not only the US advertising, but it's also the spillover effect of global advertising that you can actually attach to that. And they have, I mean, Netflix is a tech company that actually sells content, and they have the platform to actually to be able to customize per country, per city, per user profiles. So you can rest assured that there's no Netflix, no equal Netflix homepage in anyone's Netflix. So your homepage in Netflix looks totally different than mine because they know what I watch and what I want to watch, and they can predict what. So if you translate that to advertising, that means that they can extract maximum value. So that's going to be the changing wave and the changing tide to the global streaming industry, which is similar to what we had historically, because it's linear television in the end. It's television at a certain date. Sports is the only one that still commands that you are sitting at a certain place watching a specific event with advertising. But now distributed more easily and with less barriers to distribution in cost and infrastructure and so on through a platform. Is what the MLS did with App, which is a global deal, which is very good for them. Probably some other competitions might find the numbers small, but it is global distribution, and football is a global platform. So the moment Apple decides that they want to introduce advertising there, they're going to make X amount of times more what they're investing in the rights. And mind you, that deal in that pricing includes the production as well. So for Apple is a turnkey solution.
Yeah, but to that point, I think it's not only an advertising play. I was just thinking about a conversation that, the guys at the Unofficial Partner podcast were having the other day, and how Netflix is actually the best at retaining customers because it's able to offer probably the best personalized content within the platform. So yes, this is going to help acquire new customers, but the key then is how well are you able to retain them? And for example, speaking about the NFL, Peacock, who actually had that, that playoff game with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think it was the Dolphins, last year in the playoffs, they were able to retain customers. So that's, so that's where the investment pays off, no? But I guess I'm thinking, okay, so the broadcasting space is changing so much. Netflix eventually, as you said, they said, no, we're not going into the live space. And then you see them getting the rights for the WWE, which, you could argue it's a sport. The NFL, another key dynamic there is all this conversation around direct to consumer streaming. And a lot of clubs are actually considering that. And I'm thinking, how close are we going to see, are we to seeing that happen? Because that, I guess, it's a very tough decision, because if you're a club, are you going to sacrifice short-term revenue that you get from a traditional broadcasting deal in order to actually invest a lot, not only in terms of resources, but also in terms of the team and the skills that you need to put in place a direct to consumer streaming solution? How do you see that?
It's an interesting question, because in the end, what you say is the key is retention, and retention comes from relevance. So once you are there in the platform, how I can get you to continue to come back for more. In the case of Netflix and the NFL, if you come just for the NFL and don't like any other type of content that they might have, which I doubt because they have a huge catalog, but imagine that, then you will drop off until the next games, right? But the vast majority of people tend to have other interests. And that's the thing. Consumers are multidimensional. I like basketball, but I love baseball. I like music. I like documentaries and so on. Netflix already knows that of me. So they are able to, just rolling content after the game has ended, right? In the case of clubs, for that specific case, I'm a little bit torn there, and I'm speaking about from my own experience. When I was at the EuroLeague, I was in charge of actually trying to create, let's say, the new iteration of what EuroLeague TV is now today. At that time, we came from I would say a sublet model in which we did a partnership with the third party, actually since 2007, 2007, the EuroLeague was one of the first that had direct to consumer in Europe. And then evolved to another company, which, by the way, is a company that then created the zone. But at that time, what we were looking for and understanding that at that time we had 14 to almost 15 years of existence. So we had a considerable catalog. Now the EuroLeague is about to turn 25 years old, right? So that what we were seeing is that you had two realities in the core markets like Spain, Italy, Turkey, Greece, and so on. You had still traditional televisions or platforms, cable, especially cable televisions or pay TV televisions that wanted to pay a lot of money to retain your rights exclusively. So you carve those out, and then for the rest of the markets, if you didn't have an interesting partner, then you can go direct to consumer and try to build your case. I actually we flew to the US and met with the guys that were actually building at that time the NBA League Pass for the NBA. So tested technology. So tested that actually Endeavor bought them, and now it's Endeavor Streaming. So that company evolved into another current provider. But now what you see is that even in certain mature or core markets, there's the appetite to go outside the traditional platforms, the local platforms, and go direct to the consumer, and direct to the property, right, as a consumer. So and the reason for that is because you trust the neutrality of the competition, and then if you are an avant-garde competition like the EuroLeague is, you can create a lot of shoulder programming that you can exclusively show in your platform. So it makes sense that for 15 euros, 12, 15 euros a month, you get all the Turkish Runners EuroLeague, BKT Eurocup content, and the Adidas Next Generation Tournament. But I see that working for leagues because you have a comprehensive catalog of games, of teams, of storylines that you can editorially work on to actually be able to have that offering. The challenge for clubs is that if you are not one of the top 6, top 10 clubs, and let's focus on football clubs that have global audiences, more than 100 years of tradition and 100 years of footage and heritage and so on, you don't have really a very sustainable model because of what you say. It is expensive to actually be able to develop this and have it up to date and have the appropriate people with the skills to manage that. If you're not Real Madrid or FC Barcelona or Liverpool or Manchester United, it is very difficult. Where I see the industry going to is something that the NBA very cleverly, I don't have any information or confirmation, but I have zero doubts that this is what they're building. Zero doubts. Something that the NBA started building a few years ago, but especially a couple of seasons ago. When they launched their new app in partnership with Microsoft, if you look at it, which is, it is vertical, it is very much akin to Instagram and so on, what they are building is a basketball super app. And they started doing it coincidentally. That season they launched was the season that Wemby was playing in France still last season. So they had a deal with the LNB, show some games and so on. So what I see them doing, because it makes a lot of sense, is going to different leagues or clubs, basketball clubs and so on, and try to aggregate basketball content from around the globe. And if they are successful, which odds are that they will be successful if they go down the route, you can then have something that is akin to, NBA akin to basketball. So if you think basketball, you need to think NBA, and you go to that route. And the power that can give an organization any organization, but especially an organization like the NBA, and having all the global fan base that not only is consuming their own content, which is premium and everyone, because it's aspirational and everyone wants to see it, but the local competition and the regional competitions and so on. It is something that will definitely transform the way we consume, and especially the monetization. And monetization there comes in two ways. The same way Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple TV is trying to congregate us by, producing a lot of content. And Netflix alone is going to produce content for, in 2024, according to reports, $70 billion in content this year. So there's a lot of content that they are producing to attract everyone to their platform. So those super apps, when you have everyone there, you have the data of everyone, and then advertising-wise, you can pretty much slice and dice in any way that you can, and actually be able to sell sponsorship partnerships and advertising for brands. One step further, what I do see some sort of model now that they are discussing the media rights is there's no one that is going to be bigger and doesn't and will have a bigger cash account right now than the big tech companies. So Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, Amazon, Netflix, and so on. They have a lot of cash. I do think that if you manage to congregate and verticalize a global sport like basketball or like football or like baseball and so on, those are the guys that will say, here, integrate this in my platform.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I have all the basketball, all of football, all of baseball. And I see not this cycle, because this cycle now you're seeing the hybrid. And the NBA is right now in negotiations, and Amazon is taking a package and so on. But I think in 1 or 2 cycles, the conversation is going to be how we can, get the model of the MLS and Apple on steroids. And those are the players. So you will see the basketball channel on Netflix, which goes from NBA games or certain NBA games to certain EuroLeague games to certain National League games to certain national team games there.
I get it. Okay. So it's more based on categories than actually individual properties. Okay, I see that happening. And to your point, I was thinking about the conversation I had with Peter Bellamy from Diver Streaming, and he was effectively saying, look, the D2C model and the traditional broadcasting model do not have to compete. They can actually coexist, because one is going to help you drive more acquisition. And then it's the D2C, like your relationship with your fan is going to be able to retain them, going back to what we were mentioning before. Because as a sports property, you have a unique source of content. You can create stories that drive powerful emotions that no other broadcasting can do. So it kind of like effectively covers the entire funnel that we were mentioning, no?
No, it's absolutely like that, because the media business has always been, and now it's more exacerbated, but has always been a business of filling the gaps of the consumer. So how I get Jaime to give me his downtime. So the moment he's not doing something with his kids or working, to watch my screen. But the next step is how I get Jaime to switch from my competitor's screen to my screen. And that has always been the media model. Now, in this case, it's about that. It doesn't need to be a competition. It's a complement. Actually, if you look at the model in the US, when there are streaming or online or pay TV platforms that go also with linear channels, you can set up, let's say, a registration process that tells you, like in the case of Spain, for example, and you are starting to see that if you pay attention there, it's something happening there. If you are a Movistar customer, which has all the sport here in Spain, but you want to watch it not on the Movistar app, but want to watch it on the EuroLeague app because you want the commentary in English, you can have 2 options. Technically, this is possible, that either in the platform of Movistar, you switch the audio to the English commentary, or that you go to the EuroLeague app and register with your Movistar user and watch it there. And that creates a benefit for both partners, because then you can have the data of, this is what Jaime likes. He wants to watch the English commentary that EuroLeague provides on the global signal.
Okay, we're seeing so many changes in the broadcasting landscape. And then I'm trying to look at the overall picture. You see a lot of private equity firms entering the scene now. And for them, stability is the name of the game if they're going to invest. Traditionally, the broadcasting model has been has been one of the major sources of revenue for properties. That calls for stability, which is kind of like, what they're interested in. So I guess I'm thinking, how does this change the perception of a football property or sports property as a stable, or the broadcasting rights as a stable source of revenue for properties? How does that change, and how will private equity firms change their views or their investments in sports?
I think, and this is for experience and some of my clients in the conversations with some of my clients talking precisely about this. I think they are delighted because there's more competition in the end. I mean, evidently, the standard of the industry is the US, which is a market that actually cannot be very translatable to other markets. So, it shouldn't be the standard because of that. But when you look at the US is a country, is one single country. Maybe you can include Canada, but they have more in common than what separates them. The media landscape is very monolithic, and you have a lot of competition there. So that makes it a healthy market. The case of Europe is different because you have 27 different countries in the European Union. Then you have the UK, and then you have the other satellite markets that compete also within the European sporting landscape, right? And that's makes it a little bit more difficult to be able to generate the type of value that you generate from a private equity standpoint regarding to media in the US, here in Europe. But that's changing, and like everything is about cycling, putting the cycles in a certain way, or managing the cycles in a certain way that allows you to create certain convergence at certain point down the road. And I definitely think that there are properties that in the next 4, 5, 6 seasons will be converging to multinational deals. Because if you see the media landscape now in Europe, it is getting a little bit more homogeneous. Let's see what happens with the digital single market initiative that was being proposed by the European Union. Things here in Europe are very slow always, but the logic is that in a digital form, Europe should operate like a single market. So if you have a platform, a provider here in Spain, you should have the right to actually watch it in Germany, for example. That creates certain distortions, which is very complex to navigate, and there's a lot of politics around it. But I definitely think that because of financial pressures and necessities, there is going to be convergence of some sort, right? But imagine that you have a market in which you have now 3, 4 new, very wealthy entrants that want to compete for the rights that you have on top of the traditional top media in the countries. That's amazing. That's amazing because that in itself generates value for the shareholders of private equity. But I think that what we need to understand here in Europe is that private equity money, it is at this stage, is not the realization of value as you see in the US. Because in the US, evidently, there's a trend that probably is getting softer, but there's an upward trend in terms of value of franchises, and there's a signaling, status signaling component in being an owner, a majority owner, especially of certain clubs. But here, we are seeing that sports is completely undervalued. That's why they're coming here, because their business is to buy low, generate value, and then if anything, sell high. But within the whole private equity ecosystem here coming to Europe, there are people that are probably at the avant-garde of that, and they are trying to learn and understand the idiosyncrasies of Europe. There are properties, football clubs, that probably are forever assets. There are assets that you are buying, and unless you, because of other reasons, need to dispose of them and sell them, you will never sell. Why would you sell AC Milan? Why would you sell Liverpool? Why? are they selling Manchester United? Is the opposite thing. Is because they need to get out because they don't have that communion with the community. So and they are in that phase, in that exit phase. That's another case. But the reality is that when you are investing from a private equity perspective, in theory, you're investing to generate value, to extract value. So it's also a challenge for the private equity operators to actually be able to how to generate and extract value without selling the asset. And that's where media comes into play, real estate comes into play, the multi-club ownership model in terms of talent generation comes into play because that generates value without you disposing of the core asset.
You mentioned real estate around stadiums, and we're going to get to that. But you do have a point there where actually football in Europe, and we're speaking about Europe in this case, if you go in general, you would argue football is undervalued because it hasn't been able to tap into the potential that you would expect from it, right? But I'm thinking you see a lot of, as you said, the top clubs, they're all investing in stadium revamp projects. Real Madrid just finished theirs. Barcelona is in the middle of theirs. Manchester City, Manchester United are been, it's one of the things of the New Deal. Now we will talk about them, no? So what is the role of the stadium in the sports business model? And I'm asking this because I was having a conversation with Christophe from Bologna, and he was saying, look, the stadium is never going to be our biggest contributor to revenue, but it does drive the rest because once you have if you have a good stadium and a good fan experience, you're going to bring in more fans to the match. That's going to bring in more interest from broadcasters and from commercial partners. So overall, in this new landscape where we're speaking about differences in, all these changes in media, all these changes in investment, where does the stadium stand?
I mean, it's great because also of everything in Europe is the most antiquated space across sports. So barring the new projects that we just mentioned, stadiums, arenas are definitely underdeveloped or pretty much in a very dire situation. But stadiums, we talk about the stadium because that's kind of the church of the club, right? The way you need to look at it from the investment or the financial perspective is what happens in the stadium, which generates a lot of revenue, not the biggest part, but a sizable amount of revenue, and also you need to look at it from the calendarization of events, right? Soccer in Europe, top leagues usually are 19 games at home. The year has 365 days. Add to that the European competition, add to that cups, maybe 33 games at home. Then you have pretty much almost 85 to 90% of the time, the stadium unoccupied. Evidently, that is changing, and a lot of Bernabeu is built precisely with that mindset. Now with the layering of the grass and the different surfaces and so on, so they can switch in a day from football to concert to tennis to whatever. Right? That's the logic, because that's what you need to do. You need to extract maximum value of a very expensive infrastructure that you need to compete at the highest level, and at a certain point, even you need to attract great talent. That happens in the US. So when the NBA teams are recruiting free agents, they take them to their facilities, not the stadium, the training facilities, so they see all the amenities and support system that they could get for their crafts. That is important for players nowadays. So a stadium plays that role. But the stadium is just the epicenter, if you can afford it because of space and because of investment, of an entertainment complex in which the football club is a main tenant. In the case of Bernabeu, it is complicated because it is in the middle of the city, and I think they are going to extract maximum value of 300 events a year. That's amazing. That's at the level of the O2 in London. So that's one side. But when you go into complexes like the one that AC Milan is projecting in Milano, like Manchester City is projecting in their part of the city, that includes an arena as well. You start to see that the way they're thinking is that we have this powerful brand that is the main tenant, which is our football club, that will play here all of our games in our stadium. But that stadium can also be part of the stadium concert tour or many big artists. And also we have an arena across the street that actually can hold smaller events, and we can do fairs and trade shows. And then we have a multimedia complex for esports. And then we have a shopping mall. And then we have a hotel. And then we have a residence center. And then you start building districts that around the stadium are massively profitable in terms of real estate, commercial, residential, office that you can exploit that is on your balance sheet. And talking to what we were referring before of how you generate value, that you can extract value without selling the main asset, that's one of them. Because that development goes into your balance sheet, so your whole company is worth more. And if you need liquidity, there are major funds that can actually buy the real estate component. You get a lot of cash, and then evidently you stay as a tenant or part owner or whatever. So that's the play of real estate. It is actually the space in which can give big clubs, or especially progressive clubs that are looking at it from a financial perspective, with the help of private equity, of like specialized private equity, to generate value and generate assets that go beyond the stadium that only can get tickets, concessions, and maybe advertising.
Actually, can you go a little bit deeper into that? What kind of opportunities do you think that private equity is seeing in all those real estate projects that you can build around stadiums?
For starters, just the value of the land. So when people, FC Barcelona, I have no connections to them, but seeing what they have published and their accounts and so on, which are public here in Spain because of the transparency rules, the value of the land of the Spy Barça, what they are building with the arena and the revamp of the stadium and the whole, let's say, mini entertainment district that they are building, just that, it is a very great collateral for the massive amount of debt that they got. Don't think that they fooled anyone, because banks or advisors and investors and so on are very smart people. They know value when they see it. Evidently, they have there's a certain component in certain spaces of sport, especially in football, that you don't see Barca going bankrupt. It is incomprehensible. For starters, it's not a company that it can go bankrupt. But for the second part is that they have a very big swath of land in Barcelona. They're redeveloping that, and the whole redevelopment of the area, not only theirs, the one that will happen outside of their control, is going to be very, 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 very valuable, and that's a great collateral. So if you look at a micro level, here in Valencia, they're building a state-of-the-art arena, the Roig Arena. Juan Roig, which is the richest entrepreneur and businessman of the region. He's the owner and benefactor of the basketball team, but he's building an arena not just for the basketball team, but actually to position Valencia as an alternative to Madrid and Barcelona in the entertainment cycle, especially for indoor facilities. That's the design of that. And what you see now is that the moment that construction started, which is going to be finished by the end of this year, beginning of 25, has boosted the residential and commercial construction around it. So now you're seeing a new city of Valencia being built up just because of that. That's where value resides. So if you need to have access to debt facilities or approach equity investors that bring in money to help you, with everything else, that's a great collateral. That's why the big clubs are doing that, because that's where a very sustainable, long-term hold of value asset class, let's say, that you can have in your balance is your real estate.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's also something, maybe wrong on this, but what they're doing in Saudi Arabia with all these Chica projects, no? I mean, they have just so much real estate, and that includes land for stadiums and sport-related initiatives, no? I guess. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And in the case, their motivation is slightly different because they want to create spaces and experiences that attract people to visit the country. So they have a different economic model. But if you can translate that into a micro approach as the clubs, you want to create an entertainment district that allows you to engage with consumers 365 days a year. So that's why museums back in the day were big. Museum of Barca is or was before the construction work started to happen, was I think the second or third most visited destination of the city of Barcelona. And the city of Barcelona has great landmarks to visit. So Sagrada Familia, and the stadium was one of those because it has global relevance, and that's how you leverage that, right? So, I definitely think that that's one of the spaces in which the real estate operators will look at in terms of investing into clubs precisely. With leagues, is a little bit different because they don't control the real estate. So I think with the league investment, it's more geared towards the media component, because as tradition and common sense in business have it, media rights are now being negotiated more and more on a centralized way.
Wow, so many changes that we're seeing in the industry, right? And I think, when we have these conversations on the podcast, we also talk about technology. And I think new technologies are actually coming in to change the traditional business model, no? So, if you don't mind, I think I'd like to kind of do a quick review, maybe rapid fire session around different technologies that are impacting the industry. We were just talking about the stadiums. So I don't know if there's any technology that's that you think is worth mentioning in this context, that's actually going to change the landscape of the fan experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, if you look at stadiums, for example, I'm really big on tech that it's geared towards live experience, so enhancing the live experience from the moment you decide that you are going to the stadium to the moment you return home. There's technology that can provide you a seamless companionship of that. So for public transport, or once you are at the stadium, going through which gate is going to be more efficient for you to get to your seat. For example, there's a company that I advise, and not to do any shameless plug, which is called Wait Time in the US, and they precisely do that. They are now deploying tech also around the Olympics with Intel and Cisco and so on. But the reality is that traditionally, when you went to the stadium and you wanted to buy a Coke and the queue was too long, you probably miss a few goals while waiting for your Coke. So what that tech does is allows you to identify where is the queue the shortest, so you can go in and out to go to back to your stadium. Evidently, if you plug into that to pre-ordering or seat delivery, that's perfect. If you want to go to the restroom, you need to know where's a lot of people going. Probably there's an empty restroom nearby. So it is very basic. And one of the things that they discover is that since that service is of such importance and great use for fans, they are watching a lot of where that is being informed, either the CCTV screens or the club app or the team app. And that's something that they done in the arena of Miami Heat or in Detroit and so on. So that's an advertising opportunity as well. And there are a lot of sponsors that are investing money in actually being able to provide that experience to the fans, right? So, for example, that's one of them. Another thing that I think we are going to see, and looking at how to generate more relevance that drives revenue with your fan base, is in evolving the membership and loyalty systems and platforms. And not only in terms of actually making it more accessible, more detail oriented, more youth oriented, more centennial or whatever generation we are right now, but to actually be able to integrate that to financial services and embedded finance, and allow you to, if you need to purchase gas for your car or go to buy your groceries, to actually to be able to purchase that with a card that is provided within that membership and loyalty uh, program, that allows you to generate value for you. You need to buy that anyway, but you can generate points or discounts in your club, but also you can generate your club revenue, extra revenue, and help them as well in that way. So I definitely see that, and there are a lot of companies already developing such a technology based on the tech of the big payment services company like Visa or Mastercard or so on.
Yeah. hmm To your first point, I think, to me, any technology that actually reduces friction within the football experience, that's key. That's probably going to be something to watch out for. Um, to your second point about loyalty, which I do agree, I think that's where a lot of football properties are trying to focus on. They don't have a trouble with loyalty. It's just a matter of how you can actually spend or invest in strategies, technology, whatever you want to call it, that are going to help obtain value, capture value from the fan over a long period of time. No, I guess this is a question that then comes to mind, which is this where the NFT space has a window of opportunity? Because I'm thinking about, Manchester City has been very active in the Web3 NFT space lately. Manchester United has also been doing a lot of work there. I actually talked about this with Bet Berisha from Sporting Crypto on the podcast in the past. They're doing a lot of stuff around that space, and they're actually trying to bring the fan along in the journey, trying to educate them and empower them. I guess with the goal in mind of keeping that loyalty, exploring new sources of revenue. So is this and a lot of them are actually tying a lot of these initiatives to physical experience. So they're combining. So do you think, sorry for the long question, but do you think this is where the opportunity lies for the NFT space?
I definitely think so. I think one of the mistakes in the previous round was, the frenzy, around speculation is never good for anything. I think in general, it tends to burst sooner or later. But in the case of non-fungible technology, what allows you to properly identify users, to properly identify the value chain of transactions. And actually, that's the key of the technology, right? When you look at ticketing and when you look at a correct idea membership, that's something that NFT technology can solve. For example, there's a massive problem which clubs are trying to curb somehow, which is in the unofficial resale of their tickets, right? If you look at the way ticketing was done before, which was manual tickets a few years ago, then it went to the cards and then it went to the apps. But it was, standalone devices that you could exchange freely. So you can you saw, and actually Real Madrid cracked down now in the semifinal of the Champions League because of a lot of fans sold unlawfully, let's say, their season tickets, right? And they, with the police, they crack down and so on. But you can actually avoid all that with technology, having it in the app, having it with iterative coding. So every few seconds the code changes, but remains the ID remains the same. And behind that, what you have is a layer of non-fungible technology that allows you to understand that. And if you want to resell that or trespass that, or I cannot go to the game and I want you to go, I can send that and transfer it to you. There's a technology in place, so I can send that officially within the channels of the club, and the club sees that, okay, it's not Rayde going with his ticket, it's Jaime going with his ticket. I think that's the path forward. And if you link into that, because NFTs has a very much has a very big inclination towards the connotation of collectible. And in the end, what sports is about is experiences, and the collectibles just remind us of those experiences that we had or that we didn't have, but we wish we had. Right. So if I have a Babe Ruth trading card, I obviously never saw Babe Ruth playing, but I would have, paid for to see Babe Ruth. Right. That's why I have the trading card, or whatever. Right. So the thing is that if you link the experience, the fan experience, to mementos and moments that allows you to have in your vault something that reminds you of, and that potentially in time can generate value, why not? That's perfect. And that is what you get with that technology, because you make sure that it's unique, that it cannot be forged or that it's not anything that is fishy or tricky. So that is the real thing that is linked to a real experience that you have or you wish you had, but it belongs to you or to the organization, and you are part of that, right?
I love that, because at the end of the day, what you're saying is, look, sport, as we were mentioning before, generates unique stories, unique emotions that are unforgettable. If you have a technology that actually helps you kind of like keep the value of those emotions and the story over time, it's going to succeed. But the first thing is the emotions and the stories, not the technology itself. No?
Exactly. Because technology can never be the end.
Exactly.
And that's something that I see a lot. It's a human thing. So you want to have a headline and announce that you did something and so on. Technology is always a vessel, and digital transformation, for example, is a never-ending process. And innovation is a never-ending process because technology is not the end. The end is enhancing experience to generate more relevance, to generate more reach, to generate more revenue, and start all over. And that's what you need to do with technology. You need to approach it that way always. Because in 10 years, there's going to be something else. Now we're talking about AI. Let's see where it takes us. So far, I'm not very sure how that can impact the day-to-day experience. Maybe you can have a more precise chatbot now that can have a better use for fans. Maybe it is a bot that through AI can analyze real-time traffic data and tells you don't go with your car. If you have a bike, go with a bike, or go to the metro station. And by the way, here's a discount for you to get an Uber or a Cabify or whatever, courtesy of the club. Maybe that's how we are going to see that in the next few years. But that's the thing. Technology is going to continue to evolve. Right now, we are recording this not in a radio station, not in a booth. We are around 600 kilometers away. Yeah, that's what technology does. Enables.
Right. And let's see where we record this, in a couple of years down the road, no?
Maybe it's our avatars.
Exactly. It's
Now
going to
that
be
I've
the metaverse.
seen avatars that talk like you, look like you, and so on, and they kind of can think like you, I guess. So yeah, maybe we can send our avatars and we are in the beach or something, talking about something else.
I'll keep bringing you back. And then, 10 years from now, we'll look at the evolution of how we've started our first episode and then, the last episode. But to your point, Rayde, I mean, at World Football Summit, we always say this, that innovation is a mindset, not a destination. And I think that's what you were trying to mention with technology. No? And in a world where we're seeing so much technological disruption, if you will, I haven't asked you about AI yet. What do you think artificial intelligence? Obviously, you can just make so many use cases, but where do you see the biggest window of opportunity for artificial intelligence?
I'm from your experience, I've been using deep AI. Well, I mean, as deep as I can do as a layman. I'm not a techie, but in data analysis and let's say big text analysis, and to help me kind of understand and have different sources at the same time, and kind of you know summarize and drill down things to the core. It has been very, very, very helpful. It allows you to save time. It allows you to, and I mean, there's a component of trust that you need to have in the accuracy of the information. So, like with any tech, I would apply the same for self-driving cars, for example, right now, which is tested a little bit, where there's no risk. So that will be the same thing here. So yeah, I read all my things and so on, and then I verify that it's working, and then I know certain things that I can ask any AI platform, or things that are not there yet. But slowly, I think the important part is actually getting immersed into it and understand how we will be interacting with the AI, because that's going to be a very clear, transferable, and actually teachable and learnable skill to actually that goes on top of any content and knowledge that we can acquire to understand how to prompt AI in the correct way.
I knew it was going to be fun, Rayde. I guess if we have the time, I just want to ask you one last question, because last time we talked about content, which is another key theme in the industry today. So I don't know if there's what's the next big thing in terms of content, because it seems we've seen everything, but you see your documentaries, your video games, TV series, whatever. What's the next big thing?
I mean, I think we are going to see more about distribution formats. in especially because all of a sudden the AR glasses and so on kind of wash out like all of a sudden. But I think that technology is here to stay. So producing content in a way that can actually be enjoyable in different formats, not only in the flat screen, no matter the size, but actually can be immersive. I think that's something that is going to be the next thing in in a very short time period in media. And in terms of actual distribution in general, not necessarily the hardware in which it will be distributed, but I think distribution in general, I think we're going to see convergence. The same way spoke before about MLS and Apple, single contract, single platform all over the world, NFL games and Netflix all over the world, single contract, single platform. I think we're start to see convergence, and then we'll see who are the best equipped sports properties and not to actually to be able to ride that wave and actually be able to extract maximum value.
Amazing. Rayde, thank you for this masterclass. It's been amazing. I don't know if there's any last words, anything you want to share with the audience?
I mean, thank you. I guess that by the time this goes out, you have been already done the FIF in London, which will certainly be a success like always, and gearing towards Mexico. So yeah, best of luck there. I'm very happy to see my home region of the Americas actually getting into the global game and getting into the global business game through World Football Summit. So it's something that I look very, very much forward to.
Well, thank you, Rayde. I mean, I think it's going to be good. I think the region needs it, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential. And I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of cool stuff coming out of there. So
absolutely.
Anyway, Rayde. So yeah, I'm going to start thinking about a new date to bring you back. Talk about, the next big things in technology and private equity and everything that we discussed. I want to thank you for this awesome masterclass. And yeah, have an awesome day, Rayde.
Thank you, Jaime. Until the next time.
Bye. And there you have him, Rayde Luis Baez. As always, just a very fun conversation around the state of the industry, about technology, fan engagement. I mean, I had a blast. And anyway, let me try to summarize everything we discussed. First, we started off talking about how brands are shifting their strategy, their commercial partnership strategy, to a more performance-based focus, or to focus on engagement. It's not only about awareness and impact anymore. There has to be more direct links to revenue. So if you're a football property out there, that's something you need to realize. And then, when you look at technology, you really have to, as we were saying at the end there, don't think about technology just for technology's sake. You need to first understand fan behavior. Where is the fan? What kind of relationship does fan currently have? From there, from those insights, you're going to have to develop a strategy. You're going to have to decide. At the end of the day, strategy is to choose where to play and where not to play. And from there, how can you make your experience unique and relevant to your fan? How can you reduce friction, as we were, discussing when we talked about the different elements of the stadium experience? How can you make it easier for the fan to connect with you, really, at the end of the day? And then from there, that's where you decide where to apply the technology at the end of the day, and what type of technology do you need? It may be artificial intelligence because you want to create personalized content. It may be NFTs because you realize there's a segment there they want digital collectibles. It may be, doing your own direct-to-consumer streaming platform because it's a way to connect with them because they want more authentic content coming out from the sports property itself, let's say, right? But again, as we were saying, because sometimes what happens and the risk there, as we were discussing with Buzzer, is that when you apply a technology and it's too soon, there's a big chance that you might fail. And it's a pity because when you look at Buzzer, that was a great business, but the fan was not there yet, So again, really understand fan behavior, then develop the strategy. And then, that's where you decide within the fan experience that you want to deliver, what's going to make you unique, what's going to make you relevant. And then that's where you apply the technology. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know if anything else stood out to you. If so, as always, make sure you reach out on social media. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate the podcast on your platform of choice, and share it with your industry colleagues. It would be great to have your feedback on these type of episodes. If you want more of these in the future. And nothing else, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. Hopefully, we'll see you at some of our upcoming events, which you can find on our website. And nothing else. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.